Aloha and welcome to another video from Maui Community Investigation. Please show your support by visiting our website at mauicommunityinvestigation.com. And while you're there, please take the time to sign our petition. The one vital way of supporting Maui Community Investigation is through this petition. The more names we can get to prove to the state of Hawaii that our voices as a community and hard work should be heard. Thanks for watching. Aloha.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for a very special TAP forum, Truth Action Project Forum, Fire in the Sky. So earlier this month, we passed the 6-month anniversary of what is officially known as the Lahaina wildfire disaster. On August 8th, a massive, sudden fire, ripped through the town of Lahaina on the island of Maui in Hawaii. And, as longtime 9/11 truthers, we've learned to take a skeptical perspective when these types of events happen. And there have been many anomalies that have been uncovered along the way. And we felt that it was appropriate to revisit what actually happened that day. And we've brought a handful of guests to unpack all that. There's been a concerted effort to really sell the official narrative. Just earlier at the Super Bowl, which is the most viewed television programming event in the country on an annual basis, they played a PSYOP documentary about how the local football team, and brought the town together, and as a way of solidifying the official story, the official narrative. And this is how the visual environment and the propaganda machine cements in these false flag style events. So we're going to turn our attention over to our guests, Paul Delorier and Bruce Douglas from the Maui investigation team. They are local citizen investigators that started from the onset to investigate, working with the community to build up a repository of data and information. They're local residents, and they've been really taking a lead on this. We're going to, pivot over to them. We've also got Kale Littlechief as a longtime 9/11 Truth advocate. But let's go over to you, Paul. Paul Delorier, Maui investigation team. Take it away for us. Tell us what you saw from your investigation.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you for that introduction. And it is really quite a situation that we occurred here as our community. It's such a shock, and many of us, right off the bat, said, this is not a normal fire. There's something off here. So many of us started to investigate, and a group of 30 of us got together right at the onset, and we started gathering data and information, and we became a repository for our community of videos, testimonies, photographs, and other data that's been collected. And so with that, we've looked at 30 different anomalies that we've been gathering a lot of data and information on, and I'd like to share some of those with you here so that you can really start to see how, as you mentioned, Bruce, we're dealing with belief systems, I think, on many levels, and this is a way for us to fight that propaganda that keeps on getting reinforced by going through the facts, the truth. So I want to start off here with a slideshow. And if I can share screen here, there we go. And so what happened, I want to go through a whole series of things that occurred. First, we're going to start with the pre-fire conditions, the way it was right before the fire, and then the wind generation that occurred on August 7th. Then we'll go into the many different fires that occurred on August 8th. And then we'll start with the main fire that occurred at 2:55. And from there, we'll go to the infrastructure failure and the fire escape, which is unbelievable when you start to look at what actually happened, and the scope of destruction, which again is unfathomable in terms of when you start to really look at what really truly occurred, and then many anomalies. And then we're in a process of looking at having a public investigation and hearing. So I will go into that also, and your viewers' support along that line would be very helpful. Now, here, right here, in this whole area is Lahaina, and you can see all these different colored bands are different organizations that own swaths of land around there. Now, they were supposed to be taking care of all of this light brush that occurred as we start to look at these pre-fire conditions. And it was very light grass that is invasive, and it really does catch fire fairly quickly. There were some significant fires that occurred right in that area over the years. So again, that's why these people were supposed to cut the grass, and they didn't, and it hasn't been reinforced by the county. So that's one of the conditions. Another very strange thing that occurred were these wind cyclones. We have wind cyclones that occur around Maui, but not to this intensity that happened here. So let me just click this little thing here if I can, and you can see that there were several of these going along the coastline right prior to the fire itself. And then I want to go into a little bit more about what happened in terms of the actual weather anomalies. And Bruce, you want to come on in here and do the share screen? I will stop share. And
yes. You showed this one already, but another thing that happened before the fire and the day before and the day of the fire was a strange white haze that no one's ever seen before. On the left side of the picture is a normal day, and on the right side is the white haze condition that we had. And here's another, from another part of the island, again, this strange white haze that covered the island. And when you look at the satellite images, you see off the coast of Baja California, this strange cloud formation, this white haze forming off the coast of Baja California. And this is a moment, day by day action. And you see that hitting the Hawaiian Islands the same moment we got the white haze and it going on its way. What was that big blob of stuff coming at us? I have yet to get a good explanation as far as to what that is. But I study wind anomalies. I study hurricanes and weather engineering to try to reverse engineer to figure out how weather was engineered. So I was saving the shots during this time. And one strange thing happened. This is August 5th. The fire was on August 8th. And you see normal patterns of wind, on the 6th, the day before. But the day before, on the 7th, this strange lineup of clouds started coming in. And everybody took notice. By the afternoon of the 7th, there were distinct lines going straight across the sky coming at us, wave after wave. And many of us looked at that and said, boy, that's weird. Look at these lines of clouds. You notice the lines of clouds stop at the Hawaiian Islands and don't go past us. And then here's the 8th when the actual fires happen. Again, you can see the lines of clouds. There's a little anomaly blip that blots out Hawaii for this moment for some unknown reason. And then on the 9th, the day after the fire, it goes back to the normal wind conditions again. So let's again, the 7th in the afternoon, you see these, distinctive lines of clouds. In the afternoon of the 8th, the same thing happening. Now, I'm going to look at what might have caused this. I'm going to look at some more satellite images. But first, I want to talk about cymatics, because I'm going to be talking about how frequencies can create patterns. So cymatics is a way of taking a loudspeaker, putting a plate above it and throwing some, frequency into it. And here the person's playing notes, and you see how it lines up in different sort of patterns depending on the note that's being played. This is the interesting thing with cymatics. You can do the same thing on a loudspeaker where you put water in a petri dish and lay it on a loudspeaker, and you play frequencies into the water. Depending on what note you play, what frequencies you play, you get these same type of patterns that you sometimes see in the sky. So this is the infrared satellite images that sees heat or reflectivity in infrared. And so we're going to play this loop. This is Hurricane Dora. It's a colorized loop, so it's exaggerated on the upper end of the spectrum. And you can see Hurricane Dora. It's small, contained. There's no real clouds above it, but this strange anomaly appears just as it's passing above it. You can almost see like cymatics frequencies being played in this upper region up here, where it's happening. So you see that area up in this zone right here. And here's Hurricane Dora passing us. And after the hurricane passes us and the storm is over, then that strange pattern suddenly just disappears right after the fires start. So let's look at that close up here, where you see, again, you see the pattern right above us right here happening in the clouds where it starts lining up, like you can see, and you can almost see in this area right here like a frequency generator creating that cymatics pattern as it's going on its merry way past us. So let's do a close-up of that one. The Hawaiian Islands, you see the same pattern up here of these clouds lining up and doing a frequency-like generation like this. You can almost see the pattern, right in here as it's coming past us. And this isn't something I've never seen before. In 15 years of studying weather satellite images and studying hurricanes and storms, I've never seen this type of pattern. It gets really obvious right here. In lower resolution, you might not see it as well. We're going to do some CGI on this and try to make it stronger so you really see it better. But you can really see this pattern. Again, it only goes right up to the Hawaiian Islands and then stops. So whatever this frequency generator out here was doing, it had just enough energy to hit Hawaii and stop afterwards. And then by the time the next day on the 9th, it goes back to normal weather patterns again. So let's do one more time, super close up. And you can really see this glistening, the frequency vibration patterns. And this is, for me, this is a smoking gun, because if the windstorm was engineered, then you start wondering, well, what else was engineered in this potential? And in my way of looking at it, this is a very smoking gun of a engineered weather pattern. So, the question is, what could have caused this? What type of technology do we have that could have caused it? Well, many of you might be aware of the HAARP antennas in Alaska, the High Energy Active Auroral Research Program. This is an old school system from the 70s, and it is a basically high frequency active auroral research program capable of running 3.6 megawatts into the upper atmosphere, into the ionosphere. It's an ionospheric heater is what it actually is. And physics today talks about it being the most powerful ionospheric heater on Earth at the time this was done. How much energy it can point toward the ionosphere. What happens when you heat the ionosphere? It raises up and gets higher. And then you suddenly turn off the frequency, boom, it comes down, creates extra low frequencies down below. And you can literally guide weather patterns, create low pressure cells, move the jet stream and interact with aerosol clouds using this type of technology. And it's not just, HAARP. There are HAARP-like ionospheric heaters all across the world. Again, HAARP is old school. Now they have new ones in dishes and arrays and mobile arrays and all sorts of different ways. And they interact different arrays on each other. And, you multiply the effect by having multiple different arrays pointing at the same spot, the same frequency. So as it says here, this is from the patent itself. With the advent of smaller mobile arrays, artificial ionospheric heaters will no longer be limited to the polar regions like Alaska. The new technique allows HARP-like heaters along the equator to create ELF, extra low frequencies, in tiny artificial ionospheric mirrors. So in the patent itself is talking about now with the new school, they can have small mobile arrays and interact with the ionosphere and create extra low frequency waves in the sky. Could that be what we're seeing in this whole situation? Here's another thing called the HARP dome that sometimes lives in the Honolulu Harbor at Pearl Harbor. It's a massive dome. It is a ionospheric heater instrument inside of that, with massive arrays of power generation and capacitors to hold the power to affect, megawatts of power into the ionosphere. And so could this have been a part of what was being used along with other smaller arrays? Hard to prove, but the evidence is pretty striking in what we're seeing. So was the Lahaina fire windstorm engineered or natural? You get to decide.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. And if you can go back to, I'll do share screen again. And let me get back. Okay, and on that day of August 8th, there were a lot of fires that occurred. This is up in Kula. This is 40 miles from Lahaina. And right when this fire started here, this fire was at its peak. There was also another fire also in this area that was started. And then in Kihei, we had all of this area that was burning. So there were a lot of fires. We had 6 different fires, another one in Kahului here. So it definitely took a lot of the resources that we had and scattered them so they couldn't concentrate on the Lahaina fire itself. And as we go, you can see the start of the fire. Now, there was an early morning fire that happened in Lahaina that was at in the morning at 6:30, and then that fire then was put out by 10 o'clock. But only later during the day, that's when the destructive fire really happened. And here's the onset of that fire that occurred at 2:55 p.m. And you can see that it swept around this whole area. And again, that brush ignites really quickly, but it doesn't have a lot of fuel behind it. And you can see that's where the cars were going here. And this was all light brush here as this started. I want to point this right here, this point out, and I'll go back to this when we start looking at vehicles also that were incinerated. But as we progress here, let's look at some of the infrastructure failure as this fire started. First, there were no cell services prior to the fire. They went out that early morning, so there was no cell phones. And that happened before the early morning fire also. There were no cell phone services. There were no electricity also, starting at around 3 a.m. on the 8th. So again, the fire, the big one started at 2:55 p.m. So there was no electricity. There was lack of water also, especially in the residential areas. And the thing that really affected many of us and really blew our mind is that we have this incredible alarm system, and none of the alarms went off. We have many of these 80 that are on Maui surround Lahaina, and none of the alarms went off. And then when it came to the escape, again, this is something that is just unbelievable for a lot of people when they start looking at the facts. But cop cars were blocking the exit roads and forcing people to go back into the flames itself. And a lot of people were, like this person here, this is what they were facing when they went into the actual fire. So if you can imagine the intensity of this. So this is a car that's trying to get, and they finally made it to Front Street. We've interviewed the person who took this video, and it is just an inferno that is really difficult to grasp, especially when you talk to a lot of people who really have to deal with trauma now from this. And you can see how quickly it spread. Now, this is again, there was one person that lived in this complex named Spider, and he had a garden hose that he had water till 11 o'clock in this one area. And he stopped these buildings from catching fire, but you can just see the inferno that was all around him. And again, as we go further down, you can see there were many explosions also that occurred that were difficult to really have any reasoning behind, because again, the transformers on the electrical lines were not live. And as you further down, I mean, again, a lot of these explosions along Front Street, and then this thing just took off, especially with the winds that Bruce described. And those winds were very circular in many ways. And very strange about the wind also, that if you went on the Kihei side, at this time, there was hardly no wind. But then all of a sudden you go over to Lahaina and you have these raging, swirling winds that were really feeding the fire. And it's
these were gusty winds. These weren't like sustained force winds of a hurricane. A hurricane that was 600 miles away had nothing to do with these winds. But they were very gusty, going this way and that way, and coming from a direction that rarely happens. It's coming from the mountain down to the ocean. So
these are people who are on Front Street who were able to just get across enough, but you can see the intensity is just amazing. That what they had to go through and why we lost so many people during this incident. And let's look at the wake of the destruction. So we have damage to over 2,200 buildings. 86% of those were residential areas, which is very interesting because when you look at the box stores, we'll show, again, these areas were not burnt. It consumed 2,170 acres. And Lahaina was really had great cultural significance for Hawaii, for the Hawaiians. It was the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom at one point in time. So again, there was a lot of historical artifacts that were there. And it was a small business epicenter for Maui, the major generation of income and a tremendous amount of small businesses, independent small businesses that were located right in that area. So, and as you look at the damage that occurred, this is the scope of the fire, and all the red was totally destroyed. But again, you look at some of these areas, very interesting. These were all box stores that were untouched. And then you look over here, it goes right up to here, and right here just happens to be the police station and the fire station right here. So that was the overall scope of the spread. And some of the anomalies now that I'm going to go into, again, let's just go look at this. You can see a lot of these green areas were buildings that were untouched. Again, for this inferno that occurred, again, this comes down as another one of the anomalies, like the weather we were just looking at. And you can see that, again, very strange how we have shrubs and bushes that are fine, but then we have right next to it buildings that were totally destroyed. Here you see a whole stream of buildings here that are in perfectly fine shape, but everything else around is reduced to white ash. So another one of these strange anomalies, too, that I want to go over, not only how the fire evaded certain buildings, but again, the trees that were left. Again, this is not normal in terms of a fire that occurs of this magnitude. This is fuel for this fire. And for some reason, you can see the number of trees here that remain while everything else is reduced to white ash. And we start to look at these trees. There's some very strange things that occur. Now, we're in one parking lot here. There were 8 trees that were all burnt right at the very base, way down. And some of the trees that we looked at had leaves on it still, but yet, if you look at the base, totally burnt out. These branches were put here after this was taken 3 weeks after the fire. when we were able to get into the burn zone. And you can see it just totally burnt out to ash way down deep. And so there's some interesting things that go along with that type of phenomenon. And Bruce, you want to talk a little bit about lightning strikes and plasma waves?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is pictures of trees burnt from the inside at the base. So when lightning strikes a tree, the lightning is plasma energy, and it strikes and the energy grounds out at the earth, intensifies right where it grounds out, and it starts the base of the tree on the inside on fire. And if any sort of plasma wave technologies were used in starting the fire, this would be something we would see, something that would look like plasma wave technology. And so we went around and looked, and we found 27 trees that were burnt at the base from the inside, indicative of lightning strike or plasma wave technology.
Yeah, you can see, and again, we then took samples also, because we wanted to see if there's any trace elements left from any of this type of thing. So right here at the base, this is all ash. The ash goes down fairly deeply. The root system is totally charred. So we took samples then of the ash of 18 trees. So we will do analysis of that at a later time to see if there's any trace elements. We also took samples of within the wood itself. We found that the penetration usually only goes for large branches about 12 inches. So again, we're just gathering data, information, so that we can do a later analysis. Now, another thing, another anomaly that I'd like to focus on here are the automobiles and how they were really disintegrated in very strange ways, burnt. If you can see, like there's almost like this energy that just came right along the side, the back side of this vehicle, and totally destroyed the front part of this vehicle. But yet the back and all of this is perfectly okay.
Now, remember, if plasma wave technology was used, just like lightning strikes, it goes towards something that has mass to it. So a car is a lot of metal. Grounded, it's a lot of mass, and so it would attract the energy of the plasma waves to it, just like lightning strike would do. And so keep that in mind.
And this is a picture here. Look at this. This is amazing. When you look at, this was taken 3 weeks after the fire, and you can see light shrub here, perfectly fine. Quonset hut, perfectly fine. This house, untouched. Even you can see the shingles here. Everything was fine, except the front part of this cab. And look at the back part of the cab. Again, this was on a large parking space. And again, it very strange. And when I showed you that one spot before, this is where that vehicle is located, right here in this parking lot. This is the Quonset hut. This is the house that I just showed you. So again, it's very strange when you have light brush and all of a sudden you have a vehicle that's destroyed like that. And there were many vehicles like that throughout Lahaina that, again, had this strange thing where the dense part of the engine is, look at the destruction, but yet the back part of the cab is fine. And there were, and again, you can see that this is tempered glass, so the melting point's about 1600 degrees. But again, how can this happen in a driveway where this house is perfectly fine and these shrubs are in good shape? This is, again, 3 weeks after the fire. And you can see aluminum here that it's about 1200 degrees that it melts. But again, everything else here in perfect shape.
When you see aluminum melting, it's within the normal range of a fire, so that's nothing special. But when you see steel melting, that's outside of the temperature range of a normal fire, and that becomes a serious anomaly.
And you can see how steel was bent here, and it did sag and it melt to a certain extent. And you can see
steel softening and melting and sagging is normal, but steel turning into molten steel is not normal.
Right. And so, and you can see some of the, again, the steel structures. Now, another anomaly that we'll look at too are the number of vessels that were burning offshore, some over 200 yards away. There were over 50 vessels that were outside, and they just got toasted. They got lit. And we have one of our testimonies is someone who was right by the harbor, and they heard explosions one after the other go off. So again, this is very strange because there was nothing else that would create that type of explosion, with the transformers now. So you can see how far away, and again, it just adds additional questions to this, that these vessels offshore could be destroyed like this. Now, another anomaly also is the white ash. It takes a tremendous amount of heat to turn incinerate to this level. Now, you saw from that video with people going through the fire that the intensity was incredible. And you can see here by the destruction how it just turned into this pile of white ash. And again, trees standing still around. And again, there's plaster that you can find in some of these areas, depending upon where the heat was. But here's an example too of before and after. And you can see this. And the reason why I put this up there is because of this blue building. And there's been a lot of speculation about anomalies of having blue objects still remain. And here's that same house here, totally destroyed. And if you go though, but there are still a lot of blue objects that were intact, like these umbrellas and these different, white things. There was plenty of porcelain, pottery that were still remained in decent shape. But there was plastic also that still remained, which again raises questions in terms of any type of, let's say, outside of the normal thing used in the fire itself. So this gives you an overview of the types of anomalies that we're looking at. We did different Zooms with 5 different fire captains and fire chiefs and showed them the anomalies and additional things also, like bodies, which we're not going to show at this point in time. But they all said the same thing, that this is more than just a natural fire. And let's just look at some of the causes then for this that are being put forward.
Just state on the bodies, we found pictures of bodies like a day after the fire that were not like barbecued from the outside, but looked more like they were microwaved from the inside. They were very strange bodies, not only of humans, but also animals that were found and pictured that is not a natural burn look like you would see.
I mean, we even have one where a person still has his hair, but everything else is reduced to this black heap of ash. So again, we're working with experts to really make sure that we have the right data and information that we put up. But right now, we're not coming to conclusions of cause. What we're doing right now is just going over some of the speculation that's there and just look at some of that at this point in time. And we'll be doing a lot more investigation as we get more and more data together. We're still getting videos from people and information. So let's go into this. Let's look at one of these here, global warming, to start off with. Now, here are August temperatures, different times. So you can see 2023, the mean temperature was 80.1, and then you go to 1953, it was 76.9, and again, it's even warmer in 1946. We're at 81.8 on that day. So again, these are different datas that show that, wait a minute, this is normal fluctuation of weather. And when you look at the 10-year averages then of the weather and the temperatures, you see that again, it's normal fluctuations. There hasn't been any real shift in terms of the weather itself, except for mainstream media, who's putting out a lot of information about global warming, well, or disinformation that then creates an illusion. And again, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with propaganda. We're dealing with a lot of belief systems that get created out of that. And here's a simple way to look at it. Okay, global warming, let's look at the facts. Okay, and here you have the 10-year averages. Bruce, you want to add anything to that?
Well, the hurricane itself being, 600 miles away and being a very small, tight hurricane, did not generate winds. We've had hurricanes go past us before, not have any effect whatsoever because the diameter of the effect of a hurricane is so small.
So again, this is really interesting. And when we look at Hurricane Dora, that was another thing that they said is another cause of this event that occurred. But it was over 500 miles away. And you can see how far in terms of this spiral that is around this whole mass, that's the extent of the high winds that would be generated. Usually hurricanes, small ones, it's about 50-mile radius from the epicenter. And for large ones, it's about 125 miles. And now we're talking being over 500 miles away while the fire was starting at this point in time on August 8th. So again, by just looking at the facts, we're able to debunk a lot of the stuff that keeps on being put out on mainstream media as causes that takes us away from really looking truly at what happened in terms of the anomalies and stuff. And again, we had another thing was high winds. But yes, what generated the high winds? And I think Bruce just, laid it out pretty clearly in terms of what we're dealing with. Bruce, you want to add a little bit more to this?
Well, again, the interesting suck that the clouds they stopped right at the Hawaiian Islands, whatever was generating those clouds. And we had, on one side of the island, we had like sustained force winds from these, wave after wave of cloud. But on the Lahaina side, it was these strange whirly winds that would go this way and that way and spinning like in circles, not a sustained force wind like a natural wind would be. It would go this way and turn. But generally the winds were going from the mountain down to the ocean, which last time that happened was about 1920. For about 30 minutes, they had a windstorm like that. There's never had a recorded history of winds going from the mountain down. It always goes around the mountain in this pattern.
So again, when you start to look at it, it raises a lot of questions. And also, Bruce, do you want to just talk a little bit about also the arson points and anything about? Certainly, there's been a lot of speculation about high energy weapons, and certainly when you look at the trees, for example, that is part of it. So if you want to go into
we looked before on ignition points because there was the brush fires that started from different areas, and then suddenly these explosions started happening within the thing. So if someone was generating a fire, if you think like that, you'd do the windstorm, you'd start the fires, arson points, and then once everything's engaged in smoke and looks like it's a fire, then you would hit your key points with some sort of plasma waves in order to ignite it, because we have those technologies now. So what I have here is I've discovered 2 ignition points at the south side of the fire. There's a probable one here and another one right here. I couldn't exactly pinpoint it, but I was able to actually pinpoint on the south side of the island, alongside of the highway, 2 little places in the brush to the side of the island, on either side of the highway, where the ignition points were. And you can see this is the direction of the wind going up your screen here. And so this is the leading edge of the fire right here in the brush alongside of the fire. And there was one on either side of the highway, which ignited the brush in this area. And it's very obvious when you look at it, that this was like 3 weeks after the fire. You could still see the black smoke where the brush was ignited. If you look upwind, you don't see any fire up there, but you look downwind and boom, the fire carries its way, down the hill and toward Lahaina, further down your screen there. And it totally, matches the pattern of it. And that fire then, the brush fire, was what engulfed the town in smoke. And then you have all these anomalies of houses and cars, boats suddenly just exploding. And you see on the other side of the highway was the other ignition point, of that fire, where the leading edge and the brush alongside that highway, further than you could flick a cigarette. You'd have to get out of your car and ignite that on fire. There's another ignition point for the Lahaina Luna fire, the central portion, which was just below this substation. Again, it could have been electrical jump from the winds, or it could have been arson. We don't know. But the other point that was the north end of the island and caused that to burn was along this road up here where there were no power lines or anything to do it. There was no specific ignition point I could find, but it was along this road right here where it started. Okay, Paul?
Great. So let me continue on here in terms of what we're in the process of doing right now at this stage. We are looking at having an independent citizens investigation. And the reason why it's so important at this point in time is that when you look at the official government investigation that's occurring, this may be a name familiar to 9/11 truthers, that Underwriter Laboratories has been hired by our Attorney General to oversee the overall official government investigation into the fire. And in a month from now, they're going to now expose, again, for those who don't know about Underwriter Laboratories, they were integral in terms of the NIST report, which basically gave this bogus pancake theory that never happened before nor never happened after to these 3 skyscrapers that went down. And again, a lot had to do with the information that Underwriter Laboratories provided to the NIST report so that they could come up with this bogus theory. And this is the same organization that also joined the World Economic Forum in 2020. They are the ones that are doing the official investigation. So a community investigation. We need to be empowered in this and really move forward and say, no, we're not going to listen to your bogus theories. We're going to go and we're going to work with experts and look at the data, the information, what's truly there. Like I said, we have over 1,000 videos. We have a lot of information that's still coming in from a lot of the residents. And from that, then we're doing detailed analysis. Now, we are looking at having then 4 different avenues to look at having a public investigation into this. So if you could go to your viewers, if you could go to MauiCommunityInvestigation.com, you can start to get an overview of all the different categories that we have in terms of the data and information, much more than what we just shared here right now today. And as you look at that, you'll see a petition. And if you could sign the petition, we'd greatly appreciate it, because we need to show support for these different avenues of community type investigation that we're looking at doing, using common law, using going into the county law, and also state law, and also in the Senate chambers also. So these are things that we're pursuing. But again, if people could sign the petition, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, help to spread the word. And we certainly could use financial support too, because lawyers are expensive, and we're certainly finding that out. And so we could use some financial support also in this process and moving forward. But again, I think we have a real smoking gun here, which is very different than what happened in 9/11, when all of a sudden you were dealing with so-called terrorists and an inability to really do a thorough investigation. We have just gone in there and done the investigation ourselves. So again, you can use even the QR code that I have here and go to our website. And if you could sign the petition, that'll take you right to the petition, this QR code, and you can put your phone right up to that also. Okay, and that is conclusion of our presentation that we have, and I'd love to have a conversation with all of you about how this also relates